All right, guys, what is up? We are 1 week away from regular season football. It is a great time to be alive. I'm Joe Frick. That's Drew Hannis. Welcome to the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Podcast. My guy, Drew, how are we doing today?
I'm good, man. Weekly trying to find this link on Twitter. That way I can share it out and get people in here. But I'm good, man. Baby Noah's doing great.
It's awesome.
Fam's doing great. Had a really good draft last Friday, live draft. Very happy with how that turned out.
Big one too, right?
Yeah, except I do not understand the ESPN grading system because I don't know how I got a C on this thing. Like I don't.
I had a draft on Monday. I got a C on ESPN as well. I think what's interesting, what I've seen from like ESPN, they really value running backs pretty high in their ranks. I feel like the running back ranks in ESPN are very much higher than what you'll see on other platforms. So if you decide to go with like a hero running back strategy, or if you go zero running back strategy, they tend to really punish you for that. So I know that was something that I did on Monday. Or I guess whenever I did that draft last week. I know when you sent yours, similar kind of vibes, but yeah, it's very interesting. I never really worry about those things anyway. I think that if you feel good about your guys, you only have to win really 7 games to get into the playoffs for fantasy. So just let it ride, make it happen, and see what you can do. But sweet, man. How many drafts you got left?
2.
Okay.
Only 2 drafts left since Dynasties, where I'm really heavy, but
sure.
Yeah,
I've got one tonight at 7:30. I've got auction draft next week, which I'm really excited about. I wish that more people would get into auction. For me, it's like I feel predisposed. Like we've done like the different draft shows and stuff like that based on when you're drafting. I feel that you're very much stuck and you're going to get essentially a core group of players that everyone in that draft position gets unless you are going to reach a little bit. So for me, I would like the freedom of being able to say, hey, like, here's the guys that I want. Go get your guys. I feel like it's a much different test in that regard, and I really enjoy that. So definitely
I vibe with that. I haven't done one before. I think it'd be cool to do one at some point.
I think what's frustrating about it is that you spend so much time preparing and, hey, I'm willing to spend this much on this guy. I'm willing to do so and so much for this other guy. As soon as the auction happens, you get one crack at it. And if somebody decides to drop $100 on CMC, it just changes everything. So it's kind of the Mike Tyson, you have a plan until you get punched in the face. Auction, I feel, is very much like that. All right. So we got some people in the chat. We got Raminator. He's got a draft today. They got a draft today going 11th overall, going best available. We like that. Definitely going to have some good running back wide receiver options when we talked about it on the show last week. I think a combination of someone like maybe a Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, depending on where you kind of feel, definitely a good place to be doing that hero running back strategy that Drew always talks about. But good deal. Let's get into the show, Drew. So get the lab coat back on. Dr. Drew back in the house. So let's talk a little bit about injuries. What you got going on, my man?
Yeah, man. So we haven't talked about injuries at all so far this preseason. So we're just going to rattle off a bunch of these here. Some of them everyone should know about, but still stuff that should be mentioned. Jonathan Brooks, we talked about the last 2 weeks. I said he's likely to be on the PUP. Everyone should have known that. We were heavily talking about Chuba Hubbard as someone that you'd want. He's a guy that I definitely would still want throughout the season. I feel like Jonathan Brooks is going to kind of have like a lost year. They're going to dip his feet in some games. It's going to be a full committee. I think Chuba Hubbard is a guy that you should roster who's going for free. It's like people are just ignoring the fact that Jonathan Brooks is coming off an ACL that he suffered late last season. And I just don't get that. So if you can get Chuba Hubbard, especially in deep leagues, I think that he's a guy that you'll be able to use as a flex. Nick Chubb, we talked about Nick Chubb as well. I mentioned it last week. I just didn't get it. Like, I don't know why people are drafting him. I think he's going to be out till like November. I'll be honest.
I can go get Sarah. She'll explain it why. She loves some Nick Chubb.
Nick Chubb's a great dude. And it's just an unfortunate situation that he's gone through this for a second time. Same knee. Squatting isn't it though. Like, the dude has to be able to cut. He has to be able to get hit. He's going to have awkward torsion on his knee. It's just, he's not there. I don't think he's going to be back until November. And I still think he's going to get a light workload. I picked up Jerome Ford after my draft. after he was officially placed on the PUP. Like no one's touching any of these guys in redraft. And
I think part of what it is for Nick Chubb is that he was touted as such a high draft pick last year that I think you fall into this mindset of like, hey, he was a top 12 guy. Yes, he's going to be injured a little bit. Maybe I have an IR spot. Can I hold on to him and stash and be a league winner in the back half? I think it's going to be a pretty risky proposition for him. Love the dude. Hope he does well. Hate to see someone of that caliber get injured. I mean, if you look at like standard rankings last year, there was an argument to be made that does Nick Chubb go first overall? So I think that's what's really driving that. But I don't see it in the cards for him this year. I think it's going to be very much like the Aaron Rodgers injury with the Achilles. It's like, oh yeah, he's going to play next week. He's going to start practicing. He's going to do this and that. And then week after week, you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. I don't see it happening. Sarah's not home, so I'm glad I said that now. But we'll see what happens.
There's always 2025, like it's
Sure.
It's 2 years away that you want to really start looking at him. And they cut Deontay Foreman, right? They haven't officially brought him back as a practice squatter yet, as far as I'm concerned. I've been watching for that. Jerome Ford is the only back they have. They have Pierre Strong, but I mean, he's been tossed around. He looked good in some flashes last year, but I think that Ford is going to be the guy. And he's going for free. And I know that Chad's in the chat saying he wouldn't touch him, but the dude's a starting running back on a team that runs the ball well, and he's going to be free. Like
the one argument I will say against Cleveland, and I know that PFF is not necessarily the end-all be-all, traditionally why Cleveland has been so successful in the past is because their offensive line has been fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you look at what they've done in the preseason, they're ranked 31st or 32nd in offensive line ranks in the preseason. Obviously, you're trying different things, mixing up combinations, putting in new wrinkles and implementing new things, but that's a very fall drop-off of what we're expecting. And if the offensive line play isn't to caliber, especially knowing there's a lot of question marks in the Cleveland quarterback room, then on top of that, if the offensive line is faltering, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go after somebody like Ford, especially if you're going to wait for a running back. But I think there's a lot of risk there that they may not live up to that bill, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on Deshaun Watson to deliver. And I hope that for his sake, he flops.
They have some guys that are coming back from injury that they're waiting on. Like Jack Conklin, I don't think he played at all.
Sure. Because he tore his ACL pretty late in the season last year, right?
I don't remember what his injury was, but it was suffered late. It might have been an ACL.
I doubt he'd be playing.
They disactivated him.
Let's see.
From whatever he's coming back from. I don't know, but when it comes down to it, the dudes are free. Like no one.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for where they're going at, it's definitely a good spot to take him. I just think that it's, he tore ACL week 1. For some reason, I thought it was way later in the year.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they have a few guys that were banged up.
And then I did want to comment. I'm not going to pull it up just because of language, but Chad said the flip-flopping on Lloyd being a steal versus landing on IR. I think that's related to the
Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's related to the AJ Dillon news, and then also Lloyd being hurt as well. But
yeah, I mean, we knew that he's had a hammy,
right? And they didn't put him on the IR, right? They're just going to leave him on the 53.
Yeah, that's something that you wouldn't, because that's a week-to-week thing. You're not going to put him on IR unless he like severely has a hamstring, and like
if you know that he's not going to play for the first however.
Yeah. And it's something that he's been going through for a bit. So you expect them to come back sooner rather than later, not miss the first 4 weeks. The big thing with that, though, too, I don't have it on my list because he's not really an impact for fantasy unless something happens to CMC. But Elijah Mitchell came out of nowhere being on IR. I don't think anyone talked at all about him being hurt. And all of a sudden he's just not even designated to return. That was like weird.
That has just been his MO. When he stepped up, when they've had injuries in the past, he was always a good piece, but it's just there's something in the air. It's like if you are a running back for Baltimore or San Francisco, there's just something in the water at those two franchises. We were talking about it before the show. Isaac Guerrero, he's been hurt 3 times and he's a rookie. Like what is happening? And then it's just it's unfortunate because there's definitely a lot of talent to be had there, especially with the question marks for Christian McCaffrey coming into the season with that calf issue. I think Elijah Mitchell was a very popular late round draft pick, like as a just in case. But we'll see what they end up doing. I think CMC is going to be fine, but I think this is going to be the end of the road for Elijah Mitchell.
Yeah, I think that he's probably done after this. Rattle off a couple minor things that guys are coming back from injury from. Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs both have hamstrings. We're all aware of those. They're coming back to practice already, so I'm not too concerned there. Josh Downs with an ankle. Christian Kirk has a calf injury. He's returned. Hollywood Brown has a sternoclavicular injury, which is like very scary. And I hope that he doesn't take another bad hit in that area because that's something that could definitely reappear based on where the location is. If he takes like something up high.
So is that just collarbone?
It's where your clavicle meets your sternum. So like down here in the middle, like underneath your neck, that bone there. That's like a really scary injury. He had to be rushed to the hospital. So luckily he's good. But he's a smaller guy. So if he takes another shot like that, that's scary. Brock Bowers has a foot injury. He hasn't been practicing, said something to monitor, but he's still going pretty late in drafts. I don't think anyone's really expecting too much from Brock Bowers, at least to start. Tight ends usually have a little bit of a learning curve coming into the league. Sam Laporta was an outlier in that regard. Devontae Adams tweaked something. They haven't really told us anything about it, but he hasn't been practicing, so it's something to monitor. But I'm sure that he'll be ready for week 1. Justin Herbert had his foot injury. He's returned to practice, and reports are that he looks good. So I know that there was a lot of fear about how he was going to handle the beginning of the season, but he sounds like he's good to go, and he's not having too many issues at this point.
So a couple questions that came up in the chat. Going back to the Elijah Mitchell situation, do you see Jordan Mason as next man up? Do you think they'll bring someone in? Dalvin Cook did get signed to the practice squad for the Cowboys, so that would not be an option for the 49ers. But I do think that they roll with Mason. He had a nice preseason, so he's
a good player. He's a good player. He could definitely spell CMC a little bit, and I don't think they'll bring anybody in unless Garendo's injury is like significant because they can ride the two of those.
They said it was a thigh thing. They said like they're hoping that he'll be good to go next week.
Yeah, I think that they'll probably stick around with what they have because I mean CMC is going to have so much,
right.
His snap share is going to be so much. So,
and then with that, do you see a scenario where if you have, say, Brock Bowers as your starting tight end, do you go and get Michael Mayer?
No. It's funny because, like, Gardner Minshew historically has just peppered one guy. So, like, Devontae Adams is going to be who you want. And they still have Jacoby Myers who should demand some target share. I wouldn't go after Mayer. You never know. Second-year tight end, but I
liked him a lot, and I thought he going into like the dynasty offseason, I was like, this is a guy I'm going to target. I think he's eventually going to break out, but then you go and you draft Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I just don't think that he's going to Gardner Minshew is going to support too many guys, which kind of leads to my argument later on when we talk about some other guys. But
sure.
I would stay away from it. I mean, it's someone to watch, but I wouldn't go out and draft them. And then I had Puka Nacua, who had the bursa sack injury. I mean, it sounds like he's going to be fine. He already returned to practice. We weren't too worried about that. Tyreek Hill has a hand injury. I think it's his thumb. I think that they're just, stalling. So he's just 100% come week 1. TJ Hawkinson, we talked about him a couple weeks ago, ACL. He's going to be on the pup, and he'll probably be out until like week 7 too. It's just not something that you should expect. And I'd be fading TJ Hawkinson anyways, just because Sam Darnold's not going to support multiple guys. I just don't believe it. It's kind of a shame that McCarthy got hurt, but
yeah.
Rashid Shaheed, he has a toe injury. He might have like turf toe. They haven't really said too specifics about what his issue is, but he's got something going on with like his toe or midfoot. Dallas Goedert with an oblique, and Jalen Warren with a hammy, which we know he should be ready for week 1 based on the reports that we're hearing out of Pittsburgh and Jalen Warren himself.
Direct from the source. All right, we did get a question from Brad McCoy. So welcome to the show, Brad. 10-team redraft: Lamar, Barkley, Kamara, Amon-Ra, Jalen Waddle, Bowers, Goddard, Amari Cooper, Scary Terry, benches, JMO, Brian Law, T Law. Did I say Brian Law? Whatever. Jerome Ford and Chubb. Who should I give up to upgrade my tight end? Ooh. So I like this for a 10-teamer. I think that for me, Brian Thomas is getting a lot of hype right now. If you can package Brian Thomas and Goddard. I don't like Goddard. I don't think that he gets enough red zone play. He's already the third option, and then they have just brought in Jahan Dotson, who kind of ruined from a fantasy perspective, but I do think he's a better football player than what he's been given credit for in his time in Washington. So to me, it's like you've got the hype of the new rookie. Granted, he could blow up and do all these things. Trevor Lawrence only threw, 26, 28 touchdown passes last year. You still have Christian Kirk. You still have Evan Ingram. I don't see it in the cards for him, even though Calvin Ridley was very heavily targeted in the red zone and those targets are now vacated. I just don't see it there. So take the guy that has all the upside right now before he becomes like this streaky player. That's how I would attack it. Drew, any thoughts or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough to make a move this close to the season. People are going to want to see what their teams look like, I feel like. But, I mean, you're rostering 2 Lions receivers. Maybe if you get lucky and Jameson Williams has a couple big plays early on, then maybe you can get someone who thinks that he's going to blow up. I wouldn't roster both of those guys.
I think the other thing you could do, like if you didn't want to go down the path of like trading a tight end, because your quarterback's Lamar Jackson, like there's not going to be a lot of scenarios where you're playing Trevor Lawrence outside of a bye week. Given that it's a 10-team league, I would feel comfortable dropping Trevor Lawrence. Actually, realistically, I'd probably drop Nick Chubb as well.
Yeah,
but I would say that there's probably some options that are going to be available to you. Some names that come to mind off the bat. Greg Dulcich. There's not really a good slew of receivers in Denver that you could throw to. Could be a safety valve. His metrics going out of his rookie season were really great. Had the injuries last year, so we could see what happens there. Hayden Hurst, we don't really know what's going on for the Chargers. He's probably somebody that's going for free. Let's see who else. The other one that comes up is Conklin for the New York Jets. Last couple of years, he has increased his route participation, his percentage of team passing yards, and was a top 12 option in the back half of last year, actually. And now he's getting a much better improvement in Aaron Rodgers relative to Zach Wilson. And again, who's really the number 2? Mike Will? Maybe. He could be a sneaky play. Another one that I'll throw out there, Jonnu Smith, top 10 in a lot of different kind of receiving metrics. Third option in Miami, but he could be a good piece because that offense is so efficient.
Yeah, I mean, he might even be less than third. Conklin's really good, though, because Rodgers likes to throw to the tight end. So he definitely peppers his tight end. So I think that's a good option. I would drop Chubb, though.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. It's like you don't want to blow up your team right in the first week. See where you have strengths, see where you have weaknesses. Maybe Bowers has been lining up in a lot of different places in the preseasons. Someone offered him Conklin for Jameson Williams. I wouldn't do that trade. I don't think it's not worth it. Dart throw for dart throw. I would rather see what I got in Brock Bowers first before I start overcorrecting my team week 0. If you're 0-3 and needing a win, and that's the kind of the area of weakness for your team, then you can jump in. But no need to overreact based on preseason projections for week 1. No one really knows what's going to happen. It could go a lot of different ways. I do like the team. I think there's a lot of like upside in that roster. So I would probably hold pat, but there's going to be some options that emerge for you. I would bet.
Yeah, I wouldn't make that trade either, just because JMO has way more upside, right? And you don't know what's going to look like.
Sure. Cool. All right. Do we have any other injury updates for you before we transition into some headlines?
No, that's all the guys I had.
All right, cool. So let's get into headline talk a little bit. Wanted to just hit a couple of different areas for you. So the first, we had some good QB battles that happened in camp. Just wanted to talk about a few of the names. Do you think they have any, I guess, impact on the fantasy season? So the first one was really by virtue of injury. Drake May wins the starting job in New England over Jacoby Brissett. Do you feel that this elevates Drake May into a draftable quarterback? Do you think that this impacts any of the fantasy relevant players for New England, a la Ramondre? That's pretty much it, right?
I mean, for me, I wanted nothing to do with New England, period. They don't offer much. I think that they're going to be a bad team. They're not going to score a lot of points. They're not going to be on the field too much. I do think that some of the stats that you gave me off the air about Drake May and his rushing ability is definitely appealing, but
yeah, let me hit you with some of those real quick. So in the preseason, Drake May had a designed rush rate for 14% and 11% scramble rate, second in preseason behind Jaden Daniels. There have been 12 quarterbacks who have posted 100-plus rushing attempts in a collegiate season and been drafted top 3. Since 2000, only 2 quarterbacks have not been a QB1, and those 2 were Baker Mayfield and Trey Lance. This year, all 3 quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May, meet those metrics. And then the last one that's interesting to me, over the last 20 years, every quarterback that's played 16 games and ran the ball 90 times has been a QB1 in fantasy football, except for 2014 Colin Kaepernick. So he has the potential. I think he's being slept on as a runner. We were looking at it before the show, only projected to run about 60 times. I think that he surpasses that a good amount. I have enough appeal that I drafted him, or I picked him up off of free agency because I had an open spot from IR just to see what happens. If by some divine miracle, Drake May somehow acquires Brandon Ayuk over the next 24 hours and the Patriots somehow get back into it, Drake May would be my only fantasy subscription for the year, and I think he would be a top 8 quarterback.
I have a question for you.
Hit me.
How dare you?
That's why we do it. But I don't think they're going to get Ayuk. Chad even said Ayuk was practicing today.
No, John Lynch said that he expects him to practice because he was cleared from that back injury. There's a lot of weight.
Back injury?
Yeah. So this situation is they're saying you're healthy, you need to practice. He needs to decide if he's going to Jamar Chase and not show up and start walking around in shorts, or if he's going to practice. This is them saying, like, this is the last straw. You need to be on the field, or they're going to start finding him. That's what this is.
So let's put a pin in this one for a little bit, because I do want to talk about, as the other kind of headline for the week, is what is going on with these players that are in this holdout sort of mode. So let's pause on that one and then go from there. But yeah, I think that Drake May, could it help Polk? Could it help a Hunter Henry? Yeah, for sure. That'd be another tight end that you could probably get for free right now. But we'll see what happens. In our neck of the woods, Russell Wilson beat Justin Fields in what they called a quarterback competition, even though we all knew that Russell Wilson was going to be starting week 1. Fun fact about Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson had more passing touchdowns per game than Patrick Mahomes last season, which is the best part about fantasy football, because you could turn anything into a stat that you can talk about, make people mad on the internet. So let's get it. Let's spin it the other way.
We're going to clip that just so people do get mad, just for the record.
Arthur Smith's rank in pass rate over expectation the last 5 years as offensive coordinator or head coach: 2019, 29th, 2020, 30th, 2021, 13th, 2022, 31st, 2023, 32nd. So Steelers probably aren't running the ball much or throwing the ball much. Good thing, because they only have one professional wide receiver.
But he's going to be good, that one professional wide receiver. That's the thing about Russ, is that he will get one guy involved. Pickens is going to be Cortland's son from last year, except he has a lot more talent.
And I think that it really does a lot of good for buddy of the show, Pat Freiermuth. Could very easily find himself being a top tight end this year. I think he has top 8 potential. Considered him being my only fantasy for the year, but just decided not to do it. Have some other options in mind. But yeah, I don't think there's much to say. Do you think that there's a scenario where Fields plays this year? Like, and I'm not talking like, oh, they put him in the goal line to run a read option, but like starts this year.
Yes. I think that there's a real scenario where Russ ends up sitting at the end just because they need to see what Fields is. So the Steelers might not be very good this year, to be honest. Like, it might not be fun. I think that's kind of the reason why I was pulling for Fields.
Hold on, I think I actually have something to respond to this with.
Look at this ratio.
Since when did you learn how to do that? Like,
the Lion, the Witch, and the audacity of this bitch. I can't believe you just said this on air, that the Steelers are not going to be good this season. Look at what you have in your background.
I didn't say that they were going to be bad.
And then you're going to do that to me. I
didn't say that they were going to be bad. We've seen what they've been the last few years. We have to just nickel and dime our way through weeks and just hope that we could score one extra point than whoever we're playing. And it's usually like 20-19 or 17-15. We're talking about fantasy football, and that's where I'm talking about. We're not going to be a good fantasy-friendly team this year.
That I will give you for sure.
That's what I'm really getting at. Like, our whole, like, us winning games is dependent on if we can stop people from scoring, not if we can score. And if that's how it's going to be, which it's likely, Fields is going to have some time, because they need to decide what the future looks like, because they're both free agents after this year. Literally our entire backfield is free agents. Warren, Najee, Russ, and Fields are all free agents after this season. Like, I mean, Warren's restricted, but still, like,
yeah, we'll see. But yeah, it's going to be pretty ugly, I think, from that regard. So if you're a Steelers fan, probably don't want to go too heavy Steelers draft. This is not your 2016 Steelers offense. So just keep that in mind. So we got two more quarterback names. One is Bo Nix. I don't really have a lot to say about Bo Nix winning the job. Congrats, I guess. Bo Nix did run for 38 touchdowns, 61 college games, so some rushing potential there. He also is going to be a dump-off machine for the Denver running backs. Sean Payton is big into that, so something to consider if you're looking at later round running backs. You got Javonte, you got Jaleel McLaughlin, who won the kind of pass-catching role in that offense, but not really much more to say. Denver offense does not excite me. Pretty much same tier as like the Patriots, just maybe with a better play caller at that position. But oh man,
Some questions, yeah. I think that you should consider it if they throw something in, because if I just go off my rankings when you're going 1-for-1 and with a wide receiver, I have Puka ranked higher. So why would I make that deal?
Yeah,
but
well, my whole thing is like if you drafted Puka, you almost, unless you were like in a league with like Ohio State people, you could have drafted Marvin Harrison instead of Puka.
Exactly. So
like, why didn't you?
If they're willing to throw in like a late round running back,
some fab.
No. I actually, my team on Friday, I have Puka and Marvin Harrison Jr. and I chose Puka first for a reason. Like he's the guy I would have picked if I had both of them sitting there. I took Puka and I wouldn't trade them straight up.
You know who didn't get chosen? Puka's brother, who got cut.
Yeah. The fact that like at the end of the half in that preseason game,
and he almost ran that kickback or whatever. Yeah.
He got stopped at like the 2-yard line. That's why you get cut. Like you need to haul ass and you need to get into the end zone.
You got to dog that one in, man, for sure.
Everything you have. Like if you have to leap and do a double front flip into the front of the end zone, you have to do that. You have to score there if you want to make the team.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh well.
You should address it.
So one last QB that we want to talk about, Gardner Minshew, and I don't really want to spend time talking about Gardner Minshew. The quarterback is irrelevant for fantasy. For me, no. But what does that mean for Davante Adams? Do you feel that that kind of is a better situation for him based on what we saw from Michael Pittman last year? We saw that Davante Adams has gotten at least 175 targets in both years in Vegas, but can they throw him the ball? Davante Adams was targeted 26 times last year on deep balls of 20-plus yards. 0 drops on 26 targets, but he went 4 for 26. 60% of his targets were inaccurate, the most in the last 4 years. Davante Adams is getting that second-round, third-round ADP. With him getting Minshew, are you buying it?
So the thing about Gardner Minshew is that he's a frick it, Davante Adams is down there somewhere type of guy. And I think that's how this is going to be. Like, he's just going to be peppering him with targets. He did the same thing with Michael Pittman last year and got Michael Pittman killed by KZ. Like, that's just how he is. Like, he's going to pepper him. And I think that, sure, Jacoby might fit better based on what Chad's saying in the chat. Davante's Davante Adams. He's their guy. Gardner Minshew knows to look for him, and that's what he's going to do. I wouldn't be shocked if he had more targets in the last 2 years this year, just because.
It's a lot of targets, man. That's 10 a game.
Yeah. That's what Davante Adams does, right? Like, he could fall off at any point. I just don't think it's yet.
Yeah, we'll definitely see. All right, so just to transition a little bit, and then we'll get into fantasy football Tinder. The other piece that I wanted to talk about for people that haven't drafted yet, I wanted to talk a little bit about what is happening with people that are still holding out. So if you wanted to pick up on the conversation that you were having about Brandon Ayuk, jump in there. I also want to hit Jamar Chase, who's still on the holdout. And I also want to talk about Trent Williams, not obviously going to impact directly on your fantasy lineup, but left tackle for your number 1 overall pick. A lot of different options in that San Francisco offense. Do you have any concern about any of these guys that still haven't gotten those deals locked in?
I'm going to tie two of those together. We'll start with the Niners. Sure. The big thing about Brandon Ayuk's contract situation to me is that Trent Williams is a much more important player to the Niners.
Oh, for sure.
Like, how are they going to justify paying Ayuk before they pay Trent Williams? Like, Trent Williams is older, but he is far and away the best tackle in the NFL. Like, far and away. Like, even when there's just fights outside the play, Trent Williams to start running up and everyone on the defense just runs away. Like they don't even want to mess with anyone else on the team. Like he is a tone setter of a tackle. And I just don't know how they're going to deal with the Ayuk situation until they deal with Trent Williams. And his situation is far worse. Like he's flat out like, I'm not playing week 1 if you don't have to give me a deal. Like he's really going at it. So
I mean, he has to. He's older. This is definitely like his last chance to get paid. Like if Brandon Ayuk signs or franchise tagged it or whatever, he goes into free agency. He's going to get the bag eventually. Williams, he kind of needs this.
Yeah. And Ayuk, I'm not really worried about him in terms of, I'm sure he's working out the way he's supposed to. He's going to, he'll probably start off a little slow, but if he doesn't get a long-term deal, which I don't think that he's going to get a long-term deal unless he's traded. I really don't. I think that he's going to be the type of guy that balls out, and he's trying to get that contract. And that's a big thing about the whole Jamar Chase situation. Jamar Chase is like low-key, like the greediest shit that he's pulling right now is just crazy to me because T. Higgins is the one.
We talked about that. Yeah.
And he's just like, what kind of teammate is it that he's not even like supporting his other dude who needs to get paid? And he's the one that's not showing up. I want everything about T. Higgins this year. Like after all this started, I think that T. Higgins has an opportunity to step in and really earn that money that he's trying to get with Jamar Chase doing what he's doing.
Sure. I think it's one of those things too, where it's like, if you think about the way that draft unfolded for Cincinnati, they drafted T. Higgins at the start of that second round when they drafted Burrow with the expectation, like this is going to be our guy. And then Jamar Chase just happened to fall into their lap in the COVID year. And they're like, well, we can't not take him. So they definitely like T a lot. It's definitely going to be weird. We'll see how it plays out. But does that change like your willingness to draft any of those guys? Or are you still just going to run full steam ahead and not worry about it?
I mean, I've been taking Ayuk. I'm a big fan of his. I think that he's going to try to play real hard to get paid. I mean, I have him in Fishbowl. I took him pretty early in Fishbowl too, because I kind of thought that he was going to play on his franchise tag at that point, because there wasn't really a lot of discussion back then. That was the problem. Like no one was talking about it forever. I don't know. I'd love to see like at 5:45, I think their practice started. So I want to see if Ayuk actually is there. If like he could have dressed and just is sitting around, or he might just be walking around like Jamar Chase did. Like Jamar Chase was told today that he's going to practice, and guess what? He didn't practice, and that's exactly what John Lynch is doing. That's exactly what John Lynch is doing right now. Like he saw that Zach Taylor went out and was like, hey, Jamar Chase is going to practice tomorrow. He's going to practice this whole week and get ready for week 1. Guess what? He wasn't there. And now John Lynch is like, okay, I got to do the same thing. I don't think Brandon Ayuk is going to practice. I mean, if he does, Ayuk's a good dude. Like he's not doing this to make any issues. Like he wants to get paid what he's worth. He sees a lot of guys in his tier. Like he's not a CeeDee Lamb contract guy. Like he's just not. But like, I think that if he had more opportunity, he's definitely a Amon-Ra St. Brown type. Like he's a great route runner. I think that he should be getting paid around what he's getting. And it doesn't help that the Niners have, San Francisco taxes working against them. But like the fact of the matter is,
you only get taxed in San Francisco for the games that you play in San Francisco.
Right. But like the reason why they're having trouble paying him though is because they need to offer more money than what the Steelers and Patriots and Browns did. I mean, that's going to be a tough ask. I think that Ayuk wants to stay because he's that kind of teammate, but I just don't see how the Niners are going to match it. And they're holding him ransom essentially. Like that's what's happening right now.
For sure. So I think moral of the story, we'll see what happens. Trent Williams is the most fascinating one of them all. I think the wide receiver stuff gets worked out, but we'll see where we land. Also, bang.
I'm pretty sure both of those are bang. And shout out to Ryan Platt, who has 2 drafts at 8:00. He's going to be on multiple tablets and phones drafting. I love that.
Also, are you drinking a Big Gulp Fago?
This is a sarsaparilla from A-Treat. Are you familiar with what A-Treat is?
Hell no. This is the most Amish thing I've ever seen.
This is a Pennsylvania Dutch soda company, and they're very, very good.
Did they just learn about plastic like in the last 3 years? Were they glass bottles up until this point?
Honestly, A-Treat almost went out of business like 2 or 3 years ago. And I don't know, some big rich guy came in. I can't remember who it was and saved them. And I'm just so happy that they did because it's like the best soda. I don't really drink soda, but I was just happened to be in like a farmer's market the other day and I saw that they had A-Treat and I was like, I got to get them. Their cream soda is phenomenal too, which I have a couple of them up there. I just didn't want to get a red mouth while we're on the show.
Why is their cream soda red? I have so many questions, but I also have questions about Fantasy Football Tinder. So let's jump into that. I'm so excited to be back. Fantasy Football Tinder. We don't have the soundboard because we were getting too many complaints from the FCC. So we're just raw dogging it this year. It's just too hard to do, man. I can't do it. But if this is your first time on the show, Fantasy Football Tinder is where we talk about the pressing topics in the industry to get a flavor for what you're feeling. If you have thoughts, feelings about this, we will be posting our Fantasy Football Tinders for the week on Twitter after the show. So check those out. Find us there. But just to give you a sample of how this is going to work. Last week, Thursday, Tyler Weeks, first pitch, Washington Wild Things. Was that the best first pitch in Frontier League history? All the true loves of the sport would say yes. Perfect pitch. So you'll see the hearts pop up on the screen. For those of you that say, man, it was a little outside. Photo quality wasn't that great. Eddie P wasn't on his game. Might swipe left, and you'll see the X's pop up on the screen.
I'm swiping right because Zach did a phenomenal job not showing crack when he went down for that pitch.
It was, that he was ready for that. Like,
he had his arm ready, and he's just like, he was ready. There's no way that he was going to be a plumber.
No, it was definitely a good time. All right, so let's get into it. First Fantasy Football Tinder of the season, Kyren Williams. So Kyren Williams has been a hot topic this week in the news. They announced yesterday that he's going to be the primary punt returner for the Los Angeles Rams. They brought in Blake Corum. Are you still admiring Kyren? That was a very Pittsburgh thing to say, admiring Kyren. Very hard to do. Are you still admiring him in ADP? Do you have any concerns about workload going into your boy for this year? I know you love him, so let's hear what you guys say.
This was honestly like the best timing ever when we decided to have him as a Tinder option based on what the news was last night. We all knew that Blake Corum was going to eat into his workload. Like 60% of his games last year, he had an 80% snap rate or better. 42% of the games, he was at greater than 90%. Those are numbers that just you can't have for a guy his size. So we knew that Blake Corum was going to come in and take a little bit of that. So what would you say his snap share would be, and you felt comfortable with him being like a top 10 or 5 to 10 running back? For me, I was
okay, go for it.
Well, for me, I was thinking 65 to 70%. Okay, if he's getting a snap share at 65 to 70%, I'm just like, I still think that he can be a top 10 running back. And I looked at it. There was 5 games last year where he was at around 70%. In those 5 games, he had 4 top 10 finishes. And the other one, he was 12th. The punt return news came out last night, and we were like, what the frick? What are we doing here?
I was just like, man, I wish I would have knew this when I was doing Fishbowl draft.
Yeah, he honestly might be RB1 in Fishbowl. Like, I think it's realistic. So,
which is funny. I'm surprised that we didn't pick up on it because he did do like
weeks 1 through 3 last year. He was taking 100% of their punt returns.
You're right.
Weeks 1 through 3. Okay, during those 3 games, week 1 he had a 75% snap share. He had 18 carries. He had 17 fantasy points. It was RB9. Week 2, he was still returning punts. He had a 99% snap share. He had 14 carries. He ran 68% of their routes. He had 28 fantasy points. He was RB2. Week 3 was just a really weird game. He had 100% snap share, but he only had 10 carries and 8.5 fantasy points. But like they just didn't run the ball at all that game. Like he had 10 carries and they were all to him. There was no other running backs that had a carry in that game. They just threw the ball 80% of the time. Kyren Williams doesn't need a full workload to be a top 10 running back. He's currently being drafted as RB7, I believe, right? I think that he's going to match that or be even better. If he doesn't miss the games that he missed last year, he's probably RB2 behind CMC, and he might have pushed CMC. Based on like some of the advanced stats, he was on CMC's level all season, but missing those games cost him.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that builds into that ADP. Otherwise, he probably would be, is that both years he's had substantial injuries. You're putting him in the most dangerous play in the game. Now that they've eliminated the full speed contact of kick returns, punt returning is now the new most dangerous play in football.
This is what's going to happen, right? He's going to be the returner. He's going to take a shot.
And never again.
And then never again. That's exactly what's going to happen. Like, there's like McVay loves him. Blake Corum is a good back. I'm a big fan of Blake Corum's, but he offers nothing in the passing game
at all.
Nothing. In his 4 years at Michigan, he has 56 total receptions. The last 2 years, he had 15 and 11. And it might also be opportunity. Like maybe he can develop in that area, and he just wasn't shown. Like he didn't show us that he was a good receiver. But like, even though Kyron Williams, some of his stats were down in terms of receiver, it's not because of Kyron Williams. Like he's shown that he's capable. It's the fact that they have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and if they're dropping back, that's where they're going with the ball.
Right.
You
And
know
you
what I mean?
have to imagine with that kind of offense in front of you as a running back, I can't imagine that he's ever going to see a stacked box. One of the reasons that I like Kyron, I don't know if he repeats as a top 5 running back again this year. I think he's really fits into that 8 to 10 range.
Yeah.
I do worry about the injuries a lot. He has a pretty high likelihood that it could happen. You can't predict that kind of stuff anyway. So
I just think that Corum's going to lower those chances. Like they're doing the right thing to support Kyron Williams so he can play that whole season. I don't buy the punt return thing, but if he does punt return all season, holy crap for Fishbowl. Like this dude's going to put up insane numbers for Fishbowl.
But yeah, he's just a very efficient runner. And when you have a light box, I mean, if you look, he was 5th in yards per carry, 8 in missed tackles forced per attempt, 7th in yards after contact. And then he was 10th in rushing yards over expected. He gets about 4 targets a game last year, which, I mean, in a PPR league, you get that. It's the volume is king. I really like the fact that he was 8th in carries inside the 5. The most predictive piece of performance is are you getting the red zone touches? It can be very easy for Los Angeles to say, hey, we have Cooper Kupp, we have Puka Nacua, we're going to give the ball to those guys and make plays for them. I think that they open up easy rushing touchdowns for Kyron Williams. And if he's going to be top 10 and carries inside the 5, Matt Stafford's not running.
Yeah, and he had at least 4 red zone carries in every single game last year.
Yeah, that's insane.
And Corum's going to take some of them, but Kyron's still going to have that opportunity. And you got to put Chad's comment up from 607 quick for this.
607.
We talked about this last week, Chad. You cannot play fantasy football scared. That's the thing. Like every single running back in the NFL has a risk to get injured. The Rams are doing the right thing to try and keep him healthy by bringing in Blake Corum. They are.
I was honestly surprised that they didn't go after more of a receiving back, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we discussed this because like that's an area where Kyron could improve, but we talked about this. I think it's just the type of routes that he's running. It's a lot of stuff in the flat, some screens. Like he's not going to have like a ton of yardage from. I mean, he's taken some to the house on some short, passes. But like, I just don't think that when they drop back, they're looking for him. He's a safety valve. So Corum can probably do that. It's just like, I don't know. I just think that Kyron is going as RB7 with his injury risk baked in. I think that if he didn't have that, he's probably going as a top. Like, I still think I'd take Breece and Bijan over him just because of like, it's Breece Hall who was RB2 last year. Bijan has that pedigree. Like, but I would take Kyron right after that if I knew that he wasn't going to get hurt. For running.
Yeah.
I know we would pivot to wide receivers, but I'm talking about.
I would probably still take Jonathan Taylor and Gibbs over him still.
So I still think David Montgomery is going to be eaten into that a bit. So Gibbs is like, I feel like his ability to like really take off could be limited because I still think that Montgomery's going to get his. And I like Taylor. I don't know if Jonathan Taylor's really like been like a sexy pick the last couple of years. Like he had that insane season where him and Cooper Kupp were just nuts, but then Jonathan Taylor's just kind of been like, he got hurt. And then last year he held out. So I kind of think it impacted a lot of his season. Yeah. And I think that Richardson's still going to run. Like they don't want him to get hurt, but like, how are you just going to, tell him no? You know what I mean? Like
you can't.
He's going to be on the field. So like, I still think that Taylor's upside could be limited in terms of the touchdown category when he's up close. But like, I think a Kyron could really just explode. Like again, I mean, as long as McVay sticks to him, which you've been telling me for the last 2 years, I've had issues the last 2 years committing to a Rams running back, but you keep telling me like, hey, McVay likes to have one running back, and I'm buying into that. You're right about it.
Yeah. All right, cool. No, I agree. So thinking about running backs that have been an interesting topic. So we've talked about Kyron. I think another one that has popped up that has been very interesting, Tinder number 2, Zamir White. I hate that I even wrote this. I hate that I even have to say it right now. But fight or flight? How you feeling about Zamir White?
Yeah, so this one's tougher. I mean, we have a small sample size. I'm gonna buy Zamir White yet. I don't think that he's Alexander Madison. I think that he's built different. I think he can take on a heavy workload. I think that Antonio Pierce wants to run the ball too. So I think that, if he gets the carries, if he's looking at 15, 20 carries, which I think that he had at least 20 carries in 2 or 3 out of the 4 games he started last year. I thought I had that written down.
Let's see. He had 84 carries in 4 games, not 397 rushing yards, at 1 TD, 13 targets, 9 catches, 60 receiving yards.
Yeah, so they've shown that they're willing to give him the rock. And I think that he could be pushing 20 carries a game. And I don't know what he's going to offer as a pass catcher. I think Amir Abdul is just wasted roster space. Dylan Lauby could, eat into that a little bit if they decide to play him. I still think he's a little bit small. I know Danny Woodhead comps, but like Danny Woodhead's kind of thick. Like he was, he could take a beating. He was kind of like a dog. I don't know if Dylan Lauby is that. I think that they've shown a willingness to throw Zamir White passes out of the backfield, but because it's such a small sample size, we don't really know. But I think based on where he's going in drafts, I think he's a very good 0 RB target because I think that he's going to get the volume. But there's not really risk to me. That's why I'm in on it.
Yeah, I can't get behind the Zamir White hype train. So I'm going to swipe left. It's going to be a little bit more particular here. So some things, just looking back at last year, it's like the offense that Josh Jacobs was running in was absolutely horrendous last year. And then he gets hurt. They bench him. They shut him down for the year. If you look at the matchups that Zamir White had in the last 4 weeks of the season, they played the Chargers, who were giving up the 10th most fantasy points allowed to running backs. He had a good Kansas City game. Indianapolis was 4th most fantasy points allowed to running backs. Denver was 2nd most fantasy points to running back. So I think it was very matchup dependent. I do hear you that they're going to give the volume. What's up?
Brandon Ayuk is not at practice, as Chad just put in the chat. I just read on Twitter. He is not there. And Commanders also signed Noah Brown. So it doesn't seem like they're involved.
Well, that's not good for the Steelers because they could have really used Noah Brown.
Well, listen, John Lynch basically said, you're accepting our deal or you're going somewhere. That's what happened today.
Well, back to Zamir White.
Sorry. It's just,
all good. So there were 31 running backs over the final 4 weeks that had 20-plus carries. Out of those 31, he was ranked 18th in yards after contact per attempt, 22nd in elusiveness rating. He had a 17th in PFF rush grade. I will give you that he was tied with Najee for the most carries and volume is king for all that kind of stuff. I just don't see him sustaining the year. I think it was just kind of riding this energy of the back half of the season. It's we've seen this before where you have guys show up I think way back to New Orleans, with Tim Hightower and all of these random guys that would pop off in the back half of the year. They didn't become fantasy relevant the next season. I think that you draft Zamir White. I personally wouldn't take him at the ADP.
Where's he going now? Because maybe I'm outdated.
Let me take a look. So assuming full PPR, Zamir White is going 67th. So he's going ahead of guys like Najee, Raheem Mostert, Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson. I would take all of those guys over Zamir White. He's also in the range of Ramondre, David Montgomery, I almost said Taylor Swift, DeAndre Swift. I would also take all of those guys over Zamir White.
I think that he's falling a bit based on those rankings and actual drafts that I'm doing. And honestly, I'm going to give you great fantasy football analysis. Look at some of the pictures on his Instagram. The dude is just built like a unit.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, he is a cool dude, has an epic nickname. I mean, I like him as a person. I don't like him for fantasy. You will not see me have any shares of him this year.
Where would you draft him at? What ADP? Because I
couldn't take him above. I would have to be in the 80s, 90s.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
but even still, there's other players that I would want more.
Yeah. I think that he's a good target if you're looking for 0 RB, though. Because if you get some really good wide receivers, and you just need to make sure you got some guys that are giving you some volume. I think that he's going to be, because who's going to overtake him? He's going to be the guy all year.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was kind of the argument of Alexander Madison last year, though, too. Who's going to overtake him? And then he still got benched.
Well, I had Ty Chandler on my dynasty roster because I thought that he would overtake him. Go to Chad's comment really quick, because this is something we should discuss, but it happened. It happened so late after we were already prepared. Like, Samaje Perine did sign with the Chiefs, and that is going to eat into Isaiah Pacheco. Like, we talked about this yesterday. I wasn't really a fan of where Pacheco was going, and I just didn't really understand it. I think that Pacheco is going to lose a lot to Perine because he's going to be on the field. He's going to be the Jerick McKinnon role, and Perine's more built for the NFL. His size, like, I think that he could really impact him. I still think that he's going to be a guy you want, but his ADP is not okay now where he's going.
I think it's weird. I like his running back ranking. I don't like his ADP. Does that make sense?
Right, which that's what we discussed. And like, that was my main thing. I didn't like where he was going. I just didn't get it. Like, but like, when you look at the running back position, like it made sense where he was at. But like, he's going
middle of the second round. To me, he was like a third round guy. I got him in Fishbowl in the 5th round. I felt really good about that. Taking him mid second, I can't stomach it. But there's nobody that I've really liked, like in the middle of the round, that I've really enjoyed picking if I'm in like picks like 5 through 8. Everybody kind of is just like gross to me.
I was very much get your running back early and just pepper wide receiver round after round after round. And then I was looking at guys like my OnlyFantasy, Zamir White as to be like an RB2 type of thing. Najee, but Ramondre, but Najee and Jalen might, kind of cripple each other, but we can get past that.
Yeah, we'll see. I heard you say OnlyFantasy.
Yes, let's do it.
I think we should do it. So some people have their guys. Some people say, what was the thing that Matthew Berry did? Was it his guys?
Ride or die, who he
ride or dies.
He snatched up my OnlyFantasy, stole him right from under me.
Yeah, Drew had been hyping up Kyler Murray for like a month. And then Matthew Berry was like, Kyler Murray, QB5. And then it just immediately that video posted, and immediately I get a text from Drew. It was like, well, there's
bullshit. That's what it was. I was taking Kyler in my rankings over Mahomes because I just think that highly of Kyler this year, which it's bold, you know what I mean? But like, he's going to run. So that's why you were getting a value, but we'll pivot off of that. But yeah, Kyler's mine. It's bullshit.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. So essentially, OnlyFantasy, we do this on a week-to-week basis, but this year or this episode, we are going to do this for the season. So who are our guys that we're subscribing to for the whole year? Before we get into the present, I'd like to take a moment just to embark on what we did in the past last year. I think it's very important. But if we look, I had Keenan Allen, wide receiver 8 on the season, wide receiver 3 in points per game, was drafted at wide receiver 13. It was big money. He got the bag in Chicago. We love that for him. Speaking of people that got the bag in Chicago, DJ Moore, $100 million man, wide receiver 6 in total, wide receiver 9 points per game, wide receiver 20 ADP. So Drew flopped it out and was very excited about that. Obviously,
all out there. Let my nuts hang.
Let them hang, King. But we are back to the drawing board for 2024. And again, we posted this on Twitter. If you have a take on who you think your guy's going to be for this year, find us. Let us know. Would love to hear it. Chad said that he got the bag, the fries, and the burger in Chicago. He got the Five Guys special. Gotta love that.
Got some peanuts in too.
Drew, 2024 OnlyFans prediction for the year. Your guy is
Javonte Williams. Javonte and Kyler were actually neck and neck the whole time, so it just made it easier for me when he took Kyler to be his ride or die. I don't get Javonte Williams right now. Like, he's going as RB30.
I would also take him over Zamir White.
Yes. I don't get it. Javonte Williams was RB22 his rookie season, the year before he got hurt. And he wasn't even a starter. Then he got hurt. And last year he was very mid. But like, this dude had a gruesome multi-ligament knee injury. the fact that he was on the field as early as he was surprising. Like, he was looking at a similar injury to what Nick Chubb is going through right now, and look at where Nick Chubb's going to be. And it was about the same time frame too. Like, I'm pretty sure he got hurt in like the second or third week. Same thing happened to Nick Chubb. There's a ton of buzz about Jaleel McLaughlin. I think Jaleel McLaughlin is a solid player, but I don't think that he's going to take enough work away. I think that he's like, you come in each week and you're like, we're going to try to get him 5 to 8 touches. I think that's who he is. Samaje Perine, I chose Javonte before Samaje Perine was even cut. I anticipated the cut, but it's official now. So there is a significant workload coming from Samaje Perine. He had 32% of the snaps right there. So, okay, let's say that we give half of that Jaleel McLaughlin. He's still looking at 65% of the snap share. And Javonte hasn't had the opportunity where he was over 50% yet. So if you give him 65% of the snaps, his efficiency was way down last year. It's already been up in the preseason, and he looks like the guy. He was my RB2 coming out of the draft. I would have been okay with the Steelers going after Javonte Williams instead of Najee Harris. I liked him that much coming out of the draft.
I probably would have preferred it.
Yeah. I like Javonte a lot.
Yeah. Cool, man.
His efficiency is at like 6 yards per carry right now in the preseason. If he goes down to 5, I think that he's going to pay off at his ADP. I think that if he scores enough touchdowns, he could flirt with RB1 territory if he gets the usage and the touchdowns, because he didn't score a lot of touchdowns last year. But it's criminal that he's going as RB30 right now.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting, especially we were talking about it before. Sean Payton always gets the ball to his running backs in PPR formats. I think he's been like top 5 pretty much every year that he's been play calling in that regard, at least in terms of like expected points for running backs in the pass game. So he does have that opportunity to do so. He hasn't really shown that in kind of like his body of work so far for Javonte, but that doesn't mean that he can't by any means.
Well, he had 1 year with them, and he's coming off that injury. Like, last year's just out the window. You got to think of what he was in 2021 when he got drafted. He was very efficient. He just had Melvin Gordon in the way. I think that he's back to where he should have been on track, and I think that he flirts with RB1 territory and definitely is an RB2.
All right. The people are ready, Drew.
Yep.
The people are ready. All right. So I'm going to stick with wide receiver this year. There were a couple of players that I was kind of tossing around. Like I said, was really interested in Pat. I think Pat has a really good season at tight end. Drake May was somebody that I flirted with a little bit, but they don't have the options there to make it happen. So my only fantasy prediction for the year, my boy, Deontay Johnson. So Deontay Johnson, here's some things for you. Between 2020, 2022, 5 receivers saw 430 targets or more. Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Deontay Johnson. We look at the new play caller, Dave Canales. Look what he did for Baker Mayfield. Look what he did for Mike Evans. Look what he did for that Tampa Bay offense. Really excited about his ability to call plays. They threw the ball 568 times last year in Tampa Bay. Carolina is projected to be the worst team in football from like a Vegas odds standpoint. We know that they're going to be throwing the ball. Who's throwing the ball? Bust of the century, perhaps, Bryce Young. But among 24 qualified quarterbacks, Bryce Young ranked 4th in accurate throw rate when targeting an open receiver that wasn't including screens. Who has been the number 1 open score rating from 2021 to 2023? No other than Deontay Johnson. He did have 4 weeks of a hamstring injury that I think did plague him pretty good throughout most of the season. He also had this guy named Kenny Pickett throwing him the ball, so that doesn't make it fun. But that was the first time in his career that he's missed multiple games in a row. So he's durable. He's going to be the number 1 target in that offense. And the last thing that I'm going to leave you with, we look at what Adam Thielen did weeks 2 through 7. Dude was getting 9 or more targets essentially every game, 80 to 145 yards passing. I think Deontay Johnson's a top 15 wide receiver this year. I think that he's criminally, like you said, being underdrafted. Similar to Javonte, he's in that wide receiver 30 range. But we'll see what happens. And then Chad's in the chat. He said his is Sam Darnold. That's pretty incredible. He said Sam Darnold QB8. I think that maybe that is a take. That's bold. I do have Justin Jefferson as my number 2 wide receiver. Him getting the ball from Darnold doesn't scare me at all. He was a dog with whoever you threw at him last year. So I just didn't think that it was worth, like, it's like you're still going in the first round. Like, that's not really anything to talk about. But I like it. I think we got some good options here. We'll see how it pans out. Can we go 2 years in a row? I don't remember who we said 2 years ago. Did we even do this 2 years ago?
2 years ago, we started doing it like midway through the season for a week-by-week basis, but we didn't start early enough to do one for the whole year. So it was kind of like something you came up with during the season.
Yeah. Marriage hits you hard. You got to find new ways to have fun. All right. So let's just transition back. So if you're not following us, find us all over the internet. Find us on Twitter. You can see our personal handles right below. You can find us at the AT412FF show on Twitter. We also have the Around the 412 kind of network there as well. You can find us on YouTube at Around the 412 as well as Twitch. One of the things that we are starting with this year and kind of already got the ball rolling was our Rockin' Around the 412 fundraiser for children in the Pittsburgh area. We're raising money to help them kind of have better holiday seasons. So there are links all over our different places on the internet to get involved with that. And also starting, say, week 4, we'll get into our kind of charting that we do for our weekly rankings and all that good stuff as far as how is the performance rather than looking at it from the season-long perspective. We'll be able to look at it in 3-week chunks, help you get a little bit better as far as betting the daily DFS sort of plays, stuff like that. So won't come out for the first 3 weeks of the season. All the information is going to be the same that you see on the website, so no point in posting it, but excited to get there. So with that in mind, Drew, we're almost 1 week away. Any closing thoughts for you?
I've been a 49ers fan for 29 years. What Brandon Ayuk has done this offseason is the most selfish thing that I've witnessed from a player. We have bigger fish to fry. Trent Williams. Ship Ayuk to Pittsburgh and let his career die with a mediocre QB play. That's the kind of stuff that you get from the Around the 412. Make sure you follow them on Twitter.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was a Zachary Smith tweet. Right?
Yeah, I just tweet.
Awesome. All right, y'all. Well, that has been it for this week. Hope that y'all are excited. Good luck drafting if you haven't done your drafts yet. And then we'll be back with you next Wednesday. I'm Joe. That's Drew. Y'all be easy. All right there.
Drink A-Treat soda.